Hello and welcome to the Sea of Startups, where we dive into the stories behind the startups in Southeast Asia. I'm your host, Kevin Brocklin, Managing Partner of Indelible Ventures. Now, if you're a founder or funder looking to learn more about what drives the startups in Southeast Asia, this podcast is for you. We're about to sit down with founders to uncover the unique insights into the origins and motivations behind launching their startups. We'll uncover the stories behind the struggles, the ups, the downs, guided from the view of an entrepreneur. So, without any further ado, let's jump into today's show. All right. I am very happy today. My guest is Joe Khoo, the co-founder of iStore, iSend. For those of you who don't know, iStore, iSend is a holistic end-to-end e-fulfilment company providing warehousing as a service solutions. They are currently serving more than 1,000 businesses across 6 different countries as of this recording. Thank you very much for being here with me today, Joe.
Hey, hi, Kevin. Thanks. It's a pleasure. Yeah, happy to have this chance to share a bit more about what we do and our journey.
Excellent. So one of the things that I always start with that I'm always fascinated on is the origin story. So take me back. What is your founding story? How did you come up with the idea for iStore, iSend?
Okay. I think this is a very interesting question because I've been asked of this a lot. And actually, I saw iSend starts pretty interestingly for me because I started the company with a longtime friend, my childhood friend, in fact, Tommy Yong. So we've been friends since 12 years old. So this is one of those rare stories where, you have childhood friends going into business together. So we started iStore, iSend, or actually we started our entrepreneur journey in 2009. So me and Tommy, we studied different things. I'm an econs management major. He's, a chemical engineer. Technically, we have no business in logistics based on what we've learned, but we've kind of identified this opportunity back then in 2009 when everyone was just, looking at different parts of the industry. We were intrigued by e-commerce, by the rise of Alibaba in China and Amazon in the States. We thought e-commerce is going to come to Southeast Asia, and we believe that we should play a part in it. But then when you look at the whole e-commerce scene, right, there's so many things to play with. Which one would you be betting your entire life on technically back then? So me and Tommy say, hey, you know what, there's too many people in the marketplace, right? It's going to be intensely capital intensive, so it's going to be hard, right? So let's not do the marketplace thing, right? Then the second one, it's the financial, right? The financial infrastructure. Can we, come and build a fintech company? Back then, we would thought that it was going to be difficult because of regulatory requirements across Southeast Asia. So we didn't want to deal with that. So then it left with the last bit of the infrastructure, which is technically logistics, right? So we believe e-commerce is going to grow. And because e-commerce is growing, the infrastructure that supports e-commerce must also grow. And that's why we say, hey, infrastructure logistics is very underappreciated, and generally anyone who was in our age gap didn't want to be associated with logistics because it's like a taboo, right? Because we are Asian family, and back in Southeast Asia, Asian family, you are either a lawyer or engineer or something, but never like a logistics guy. So you could imagine how difficult it is for us to convince our parents that send us to all these prestigious schools overseas that, after all the tuition, we've decided to kind of, just invest our entire life into logistics. And there was still a pretty strong stigma on logistics. People thought it was super manual. I think my mom thought it was like a bunch of shirtless guys, moving stuff on the docks. There was the imagery that people associated with logistics back then. Obviously, it's all untrue. So 2009, we started to look at logistics. We thought the fulfillment by Amazon was a fantastic idea, right? We wanted to kind of replicate that for Southeast Asia, but obviously at that time, it was super early in the market, right? This is where we tried to replicate a product that had no market yet. The market wasn't there yet. So what we did was we focused a lot on the last mile delivery. So it was like kind of, point-to-point delivery, and we hired a bunch of employees, and then we had trucks, we had, motorcycles to deliver stuff across for our clients. And it's not until 2015, right, that we really kind of went back into our original idea. Because in 2013, me and Tommy had this epiphany moment that, we had this very frank, honest man-to-man conversation. It's like, hey, is this what we set out to do? They said, no, this is not what we set out to do. We wanted to build a fulfillment business, but because of survival, because of the market, we pivoted to last mile. And we at that point decided to say, hey, you know what? We're just going to drop 90% of our revenue. We're just going to invest everything we had into our original vision and just kind of, do this crazy gamble. And luckily it turned out well, right? In 2013, we picked up a few big clients, and that was also the turning point for Southeast Asia. We started to see major platforms start to, be created. The one like the group buying. The group buying was the first kind of the wave in Southeast Asia where e-commerce was really started, at least for retail products, right? And then we ride on that wave, and then one warehouse became, 2 warehouse, 3 warehouse, and now we have 29 warehouses across, the countries that we operate, right? So, and that's practically how we started.
I find it really interesting that you started off with the iSend portion of the name, and then you migrated back over into the original idea, which was the combination of, but more so on the iStore. I'm curious. You said that you dropped 90% of your revenue in order to shift back the focus. How did you go about deciding that? And as an organization, I have to imagine that you had to get multiple people on board with that process as well. And maybe even circling back to the family aspect that you said that you started with, I'd have to imagine that your own parents thought you were a bit crazy by shifting away from your core revenue as well.
Yeah, that was one of the very important moment in our history, honestly, me and Tommy. The first thing we identified was, how could we scale this business? Because we were getting to a certain size that we had to decide that, like, to scale this business up, which is the last mile bit of the business. And then when we looked at it and we started to think about raising money or putting money, right, more of our money into that business, we had a lot of questions ourselves that we couldn't answer, right? Is this, and the most important one was really, is this what we want to do? And turns out that question and the answer is no, right? And rightfully for all the reasons that we don't want to do it, because we didn't set it out. It was not our vision in the first place, right? That really was the one that, that was the most important one, right? Because if you're gonna spend a big portion of your life investing in something and putting 120% in it, you got to be doing something you love or you want to do, right? If you're doing it just to survive, there is no way, even if we put all our resources, that I think success will be far and wide apart, right? That's why, that was the belief. And when we did that, obviously it was a big gamble, because 90% we were surviving. And I use the word surviving because it was really difficult. Margin was thin, etc., etc. And to make that decision, we had to have a buffer, right? We can't just switch immediately and then what are we going to pay ourselves, or how are we going to pay our employees? Do we have to fire everyone? So we set out then to raise an angel round and say, hey, this is where we need capital, right? Let's bring in an external capital, friends or angel, bring in a small amount to the company so that we can do this pivot without, I guess, completely shutting down the entire thing, right? So that's when we did that. Once we raised that small angel round, we started to pivot the entire business. We pivot from not only just our clients, right? We told them we're not doing this business anymore. We also moved our employees that were drivers or people who ride motorcycles into personnels in the warehouse. And thankfully, those skills are not hard to get by. So then we slowly train them. And then some of them, I'm proud to say that some of them are still with the company after so many years.
Okay. Yeah, I imagine that must have been an incredibly difficult leap, but it's nice to hear that you were able to transition the employees so that you didn't have a big turnover. You basically were able to shift where they were being utilized, right?
Yeah, that's right. We try our best, but obviously there were some that that didn't want to be in the warehousing business, or they felt that they wanted to pursue something else, and then those we had to let go. But it was minimized through that.
On the warehouse side, so there's been a big boom overall across the globe in regards to the penetration of technology across warehouse operations. Tell me a little bit about, as you started shifting your focus towards the warehouse operations, how did you focus your efforts towards incorporating technology in order to get the efficiency, in order to be able to scale it, to kind of start clawing back against that 90% of revenue that you gave away?
So yeah, so we've always been technology focused, right? Even when we were doing last mile, we were trying to incorporate as much technology as we can get our hands on. Given limited funds, we were outsourcing some of our programming work, building our website, tracking, etc. Right, whatever that we can get our hands on. So, but technology has always been one of the things that we really believed in, that it was going to be something that will differentiate our business and the way we do business. Because if you look at logistics, right, back then, when even some parts of it right now, it's actually quite low tech, right? I think, like I mentioned, the imagery, the the imagery of low tech, manual, hard labor. That is what people still think about logistics, right? So we wanted to change that. We say, hey, and the one that gave us inspiration, I think, started from Amazon, right? Amazon's warehouse was huge. It was, starting to be automized. And we wanted to say, hey, this is the future of warehousing. How can we play a part? And that's when we started, and that's what we raised our angel round for, right? It's to build our own tech team, build our own engineering team, start building the product that will eventually be what we are using today, called Odin, right? An online delivery and inventory network that we've built for ourselves since then. So that's the part of it, right? And we felt that, and now I think definitely after so many years in the business, I definitely feel that logistics, it can be kind of broken down into two simple elements, right? It's actually human labor, right, or the component of human, and also the space, right? These are the two main ingredients of logistics. But if you kind of how you think about applying technology to optimize, to make it more efficient on these two parts, that is modern logistics, right? How do we apply technology to get the most out of the human and the space that you're given? That would be what we are focusing on.
Okay. And you mentioned that you have 29 warehouses across the countries that you operate. I'm curious as well, because leading off of the example of Amazon, one of the trends that they've had is that they've shifted from just having single source, very large warehouses, to having kind of a hub and spoke model where they can end up having smaller outlets, leveraging technology to understand what should be housed and which ones, so that they can end up decreasing the amount of delivery time by having products closer. Is that some of the logic that you've incorporated by having 29 different warehouses across, 6 countries?
Yeah, actually, good question. But actually, there is many different factors, but I will start with the first one, right? Why do we have 29 warehouses today? It's because of our business model, right? Out of that 29 warehouse that runs on our system, 11 of them we operate ourselves. And out of that, 18 of them are actually licensed out either as a software or a commercial agreement. And which is where I think the one-liner iStore what we're focusing on, warehousing as a service, right? So what is it? Warehousing as a service. We've been known as the pioneer and the leader in fulfillment, running our own warehouse, making a profitable business out of the fulfillment business. But then when we was hit by the COVID, limitation, even we wanted to grow, there was actually a limitation on how we could grow, because the acquiring more space was getting difficult given the restriction, the lockdown, etc. Right? And then we started to think about how can we then expand our footprint the easiest way. And that's when we started to think, hey, why not? What's the difference between iStore, iSend warehouse and a typical traditional warehouse? The technology, the know-how, the clients, right? So why don't we bring this into any warehouses? And that's when warehousing as a service, as a platform, start to become something real. And then we POC'd it in 2021 with one of the warehouse partners in Singapore. And then now, we started to have a lot more partners in this, right? So basically, a lot of these traditional warehouses we are working on with, right, putting our technology, putting our clients, into it, right, so that they can also operate and start generating fulfillment business out of their assets. So that's business model is one of them. The second thing is obviously also about specialization, right? So we now run one of the largest independent e-commerce warehouse in Malaysia, 200,000 square feet near the seaport. Right, so it's a general warehouse, right? So why do we have a general warehouse and it's not a specialized, let's say, a fashion warehouse or an electronics warehouse? It's because we didn't have the volume back then, right? You need to have volume before you start to become specialized, right? So then we started, once we had volume, then we can start seeing, hey, let's build more specialized warehouse. Maybe we can have all the fashion client in one warehouse. When we can have a segment of these clients in this warehouse. Once we have specialization and mass, that's when further efficiency starts to kick in, right? Then you can have automation that makes sense. Imagine if you try to automate a general warehouse that there is chairs and there's also clothes. Automation won't run really, really efficiently, right? But if you're having a big facility that was just focused on fashion, then you start having that math to make automation work, right? So then that's the second one. Then the third one, last one, was also because we have actually 6 different warehouses in Indonesia, and this is spread across all the islands, right? The big islands. Why do we have this? It's because to move it nearer to our customers, because maybe you don't, maybe in Malaysia, you don't feel the pinch, like if you're buying from, let's say, the North State to the South State, because we're still connected by land. That's great. So then that's one rate. But in Indonesia, it actually does take a lot of time and cost to ship something from, let's say, Jakarta to another island, right? So how do we reduce the time to deliver as well as the cost to deliver? Is to move the stocks nearer to the customer. So then we need to have a bit more prediction into moving and replenishing stocks into certain warehouses. We have to do some prediction and say, hey, you know what, there's going to be 1,000 units of this that's going to be sold in island A, so let's put it there. So that is also one of the reasons. So that's how we end up with so many warehouses across Southeast Asia.
Okay. Can I delve a little bit into the features that would be included in warehousing as a service? Because what I'm kind of envisioning is that there's several different aspects in the operations of a warehouse, from understanding the quantities of inventory to have on, where to store them, what spot on the shelf within what spot of the warehouse. And then you have the entire process of picking, packing, getting ready to ship, validating the QC process to make sure you're shipping the right items. How have you integrated into all of those lines? And is there any area that's next on the horizon, I guess, as well?
Okay. Yeah, so when we approach how we're going to optimize the way we've done fulfillment, is because I think it's very unique, because me and Tommy both had no prior experience in logistics, zero. So we started and I guess benefited from a clean state. So we could imagine anything we want, and we had no shackles, no predisposition of how things are supposed to be. So then we challenged every single process, right? But when we looked at it, actually a warehouse or a fulfillment house, it's actually like a factory that's creates a parcel generating factory, if you will. Then we cut that factory process into 7 or 8 parts, and then we got technology involved in every part of that stage, and then we get people to specialize in every part, and it's just like a factory, right? Everything just works in a single line, and everything process just works like that. And obviously, once you kind of dissect it into parts and modules, right, it's easier to manage, it's easier to optimize, it's easier to monitor, it's just a lot easier. So that really that was the first approach we did with how we designed the process, right? So then, of course, all these questions that you had about an accuracy, about what is the most cost-effective movement in terms of route planning, in terms of inventory storing, where the ABC stock, when we say ABC stock, means the A are the high moving ones, the C are the low moving ones. Where are they supposed to go in? And do you do that? How do you minimize that? Because if you put the A stock in front, nearer to the packing station, that route, it's much more faster, and you'll be surprised, the savings could be up to 20-30%, right, on just that one optimization. And that's just one thing. That's probably like 1,000 different little details that we have to kind of thought of, and over the years we've added more, right? Just a button less here, an action less there. It all helps in optimizing that process and reducing error, creating more speed. That is what we've done, right? Optimizing the space. Where do we put things? How many things do we put in X space? And then optimizing the human labor. What is the route they walk? All these things are all embedded into the process. Technology is embedded in the entire process. It's very software driven. We've built our own OMS, WMS, TMS stack, right? So I don't know what to call it besides that, right? So it's like a whole system built for ourselves, right? And it's built purposefully to serve the fulfillment business the way we see it. And it's worked beautifully to the point that we started commercializing it like 2-3 years ago, when people say, hey, you know what, I want to have your system, I want what you are using. Right. So I think that is really a validation on how the product is successful for us. Right. So yeah, I think moving forward, right, I've mentioned a bit in our previous conversation, once you have the software, right, which is like the brain of the warehouse, now can we make it even more automated, even more efficient? Can we equip our warehouse employees with more tools to make their work even simpler, right? Then hardware automation comes into play, right? Maybe 2-3 years, we started this journey maybe 3-4 years ago, when we look at all the hardware automation in the market for warehousing, right? And then at that point, the cost was actually too high. The math didn't work out. Our volume was too low, the cost was too high, ROI was in 10 years, no one's going to invest in that, right? And then now with everything kind of, cost optimization has went down significantly, right? With sales and people using more, there's more players, right? And then, our volume has also grown over the years. So the math is coming into a reality right now. So we've actually started looking at bits and parts of automation that help, again, just looking at certain processes, because we've cut the processes, we can just choose certain processes and say, hey, let's automate this, right? Let's make this more efficient.
I love the very methodical approach of breaking the operations into individual segments and then focusing on those individual ones and further segmenting it, and with the heavy focus on how can we incorporate software in order to optimize. I want to switch, because you purpose built all of the software for your own internal use case, and then you switched over to commercialize it. And I'm curious that when you switched over to commercialize it, did you have any struggles in those initial onboarding processes? Because
Sure.
When you've been using something for a long time is one thing, but then in order to get somebody else to use it as if it's intuitive, I'm curious there.
Oh, that's a very good question. It brings back nightmares and horror stories, right? So you're right? When you're building something internally, right, the UI UX is like one of the last thing you invest on. So if you come and look at our software today, even today, right, it's not the most beautiful software for sure, right? Because we've not spent so much time on the UI UX. But what we've done is we've spent a lot of time on the front end for the customers. So when a customer comes in, any customer of iStore iSend today that signs up with us immediately gets an access, just like Facebook, right? You get your own account, you get to see what's going on in the warehouse in real time, right? You could tell that if this item is being picked, being packed, being staged, everything on real time in that dashboard. It has, SLA, how much is being done, how much is not being done, etc. So we want to make sure that we give transparency, and that UI that user experience is very important. That's what the customers see, right? So that's the first thing that we really invested on. But then when we start to commercialize, we also need to talk about the back-end experience, right? Which is the warehouse operators. How is their experience? And that's when we started to set up our own team to really look into this one bit, which is the back-end experience, the back-end UI UX. And we are still optimizing that as we speak, right? We've built a bit more intuitive, making things more easier to understand. But the early years was difficult, right? Our customers were loving the features, but then you had to kind of had like a week training, and then there was question on how to do this and that, right? But then after that, And because of all these questions, and thankfully for all our customers that was very vocal on their opinion, they help us refine the product even more from there. And that also benefited our processes, right? Because although it was an afterthought, right, but now we benefit from it, because when we make the interface beautiful and intuitive, the side benefit was actually even our warehouse operators onboarding was much quicker. So people could be able to kind of, come in, just learn one day and be, 50% proficient with certain modules already. So that really cuts down on the training part. And then it's all part of the journey, right? And then now, because of all this, optimization, we can then now move on to the WaaS platform, right? So without that, probably it's going to be difficult, but because we have gone through that entire history, trying to commercialize our technology, that all kind of, uh, I guess by design, by grand design somewhere, just kind of make things work.
Yeah. Improving for a new commercialization actually ends up having the related benefit of making it easier on your own internal organization with core product. I'm curious when talking about commercializing this technology for other warehouses, do you have more success with the warehouses that are much more manual, or the ones that are a little bit further along the adoption curve? Where do you find the most success in regards to the value proposition to them? And I ask because I assume there are plenty of warehouses out there that are still kind of in the old manual style process, the imagery that you mentioned in the beginning here.
Yeah. So I think we speak from operators ourselves. It was extremely struggle. So we didn't set out to build 100% all our technology ourselves, but we had no choice but to build it, because back in the days there was no off-the-rack solution, right? And even right now, today as we speak, right, even the off-the-rack solutions are actually quite cost prohibitive if you are operating. Let's say if you have an ambition to start a fulfillment business, but then the first cost is technology, then it's going to be very difficult for you to make money, right? So then the licensing fee, the maintenance fee, etc. You can get a very entry level WMS from a lot of providers, but then it will not get the job done, because you need to get integrated with all your clients, because your clients, you don't control where your clients sell, right? So then if your clients start selling on a channel that your current software don't provide, then that's a less market for you to attack, right? So then that all becomes problem, right? And of course, if you try to get, upgrade to the next tier, get some customized, integration, that all costs a lot of money. So we saw that problem, because we were the ones facing that problem. And that's why we started with WaaS as well, right? So it's a revenue share model, right? We don't charge them an upfront, a yearly license fee or a recurring maintenance fee. We do a revenue share, meaning we only start getting our revenue if you are getting your revenue, right? So in that sense, it was kind of much easier for a lot of people to start this business and partner to come on board with us, because there's no like upfront fee, right? They had to recuperate later. So we took that technology, I guess the painful technology part away from the consideration, so that they just have to consider the other parts of the business, right? And they just have to make sure that part work, and then we'll take care of the rest. Let's simplify process for a lot of our partners. And we see the most traction, especially for partners that have underutilized assets, right? Not so much for people who have aspiration to start a warehouse, because there is still cost associated with starting a warehousing business. You have to rent a space, you have to put in capex on racks and stuff, right? So those are still something that you have to invest, but we have the most success for people who've already invested in it and probably not scaled as well, right? Maybe they 2-3 years ago, they were aspiring to be fulfillment businesses, but then after 2 years, they're still struggling because of whatever technology issues, right? And their warehouse is maybe 30% utilized. These partners are the best, because they already understand the pain point. They understand the value that we bring to them. They see as what we see, right? So then convincing them it's extremely much more easier, right? And then it definitely benefit for having a partner that is also interested to grow the fulfillment business, right?
Okay.
Underutilized asset also comes from division of businesses that had there's a lot of businesses in Southeast Asia that has like a logistics division, but then the logistics division is not really optimized. It's just built for kind of for internal use and maybe for B2B businesses. And as business shift, right, from B2B to B2C, right, some of these B2B warehouses becomes underutilized. And these are also some of our best partners, right, because they now need to kind of cross over and start going into serving a different segment of the customers. Previously, without technology, they could only just kind of rent out the space as a basic storage, and you don't have a lot of revenue per square feet on a storage business, right? What are the value adds that you can add in? And that's when we help, right? With our technology, and on top of the WaaS model, we don't only just bring technology, we also bring the clients. Because iStore has built a brand name itself, a lot of people trust our service, right? So in that sense, we also need to find quality partners to work with. But then once we have a quality clients and quality partners, then they all kind of jive together, right? So that is also what's happening.
So if you have a brand that trusts you and then you sign on a new license agreement with another warehouse, you might actually be able to leverage that and bring that brand to a new warehouse location as well. So you're benefiting the brand, you're benefiting the new warehouse. Am I understanding that?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, to set all this up, I'm curious whether or not you had to recruit a new sales force dedicated for this new for monetizing these assets of selling selling the warehousing as a service model, or was it the same team?
So we come to a structural organization, right? So over the years, our company has grown from a small company to a relatively bigger one, right? And a more general function to more specialized functions, right? So one of the things that we realized early on was when we had like the BAU, the business as usual units, trying to do new things, it doesn't really jive well, because you have a bunch. You imagine you hired a general manager and you've given him a KPI that's benchmarked on profitability for the main business, right? Then now you add on and say, hey, on top of that, you need to drive this new business unit that might or might not work, that has high rate of failure, you have to learn everything from scratch, etc., etc. Then it doesn't work well, because you're now judging him primarily. His main responsibility, 90 to 100% is on the standard business process, right? So then you definitely, even if I was on his shoe, I will focus on the things that is the easiest, the one that has processes, the main product, right? So then that's why we decided to say, hey, you know what, for all these new ideas and new things to thrive, before it gets folded into BAU, there must be an internal department that incubates it into success. And that's where we created a department called New Initiative, and which is now led by my founder partner, Tommy. So we identified that the founders I guess skill, right, or innate talent is to kind of build new things, right, solve new problems, right, and that's where the New Initiative thrive, right. We throw all new ideas to that, and right, it has a budget, and some fail, most maybe half of them fail and half of them will succeed, right. But the ones that succeed, just like the WaaS, would change the trajectory of the company.
Yeah, I mean that's any kind of startup idea or otherwise, is that there's always going to be an existing failure rate. But I love how you're actually institutionalizing the efforts towards constantly innovating and constantly trying to come up with something new.
Yeah, it's the dream job. It's like a playground, right? So in that sense, we also think about maybe when the company becomes so large that we are no longer the CEO, we will have something to fall back on, right? So like the founders' playground to start new things, solve new problems, keep us innovative. And I think
I love that. Yeah. The founders' playground. I'm gonna have to borrow that phrase from time to time.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of founders start their business because they wanted to solve new problems.
Yeah. I'm curious. You've grown the organization, and you've gotten quite a decent amount of headcount underneath. How has the process of hiring, onboarding, training, how has that evolved over time?
wow, it's changed so much, right? And from the day we started as a small company, a startup, until now. So like just to give you a snapshot, we didn't even have HR back then, right? So there was just me and Tommy. So you go through this stage where you're just kind of like in the Southeast Asia version of one leg kick. We call it one leg kick or multi-hat, right? Multi-hat taken to extreme, where the founders just do like 3-4 things. They are the CFO, the COO, everything, right? So you go through this first journey because you don't have a lot of money, you've not raised a lot of money, you have to be cost conscious. The function is not big enough for like even a full head count, right? It's all like, spend 2 hours in HR, 1 hour in this and that. So you had to have multi-hat this function as a founder. And as the company grew, certain functions become more and more heavy, right? Let's say accounting, right? Accounting, maybe it used to be an hour a week where we just kind of key in every expenses, and it becomes an hour a day. It becomes a day-to-day job, right? So once that becomes big enough, right, then we started to specialize and hire headcounts for that, right? Starts with, an in-house accountant, and when you have in-house accountant, you have, 2, 3 other people. You have people in charge of AR, then you have in charge of credit, even under the function, there are sub-functions that grew, become bigger and bigger, right? And they in themselves will become a headcount itself. Then you need someone to manage the entire, all these functions, right? It's sub-functions. Then you have head of finance. Then after that, you have multiple countries. Then you need to have a regional head of finance, etc. So it kind of grows with the company, right? As the job increases and the function becomes more important, you start to hire specialized headcount from there. And then obviously the founders then let go, right? And then do the things that they are better in, right? So today we've come into a stage where we are getting more and more specialized, right? And I think this trend might continue for a while. And I say this to a lot of young entrepreneurs and people who start their business, right? They've gone through this journey, and I heard this many times as well with discussion with other founders, is that every time a company goes through a different stage, it is a different company. It's no longer the company that you knew before, right? So every time your company grows from, let's say, 10% to 50%, it's a whole different company, right? Then everything needs to change. The way you look at it, the way you manage it, the people that is suitable for it, etc. So along the way, we've had to find people who are more specialized in certain skills, right? And then people who are not as specialized might have to take a step down to do more general other activities, right? So then this is how the business grow. And I think to embrace this early is it's a much better thing than people who didn't know about it. Because in the Notion, I am cognizant that some of the people who are listening to this podcast might be Southeast Asia founders. We have this cultural thing where we kind of hold on to the founding members, and you hope that the founding members can go all the way until the end for your company, right? And it's definitely a nice notion to have, but statistically saying, maybe 3 out of 100 of your founding members will be still with you when you are at a certain stage of your company, right? And
at some point a organization is going to outgrow in complexity than the capacity of the founders, and it's okay for that. I mean, there's always the founders playground. It's a fallback on, right?
Yeah. So that's why, right? That's why I think embracing that philosophy early on, it's good for the employee as well as the founder, right?
Yeah, I love that. Staying on the theme of growth, I'm curious of how you define success for the organization and how this has evolved over time.
Oh, okay. Wow. Pretty broad question.
Yeah,
Uh,
but
yeah, I think success came in many different stages. I think success came when there's validation, right? Validation from your customers for sure, right? Once your customer grows, right, with you, I think that's pretty good. It's a good sign that you're doing something well, right? If the customers that with you are sticking with you for the past 8 years and they have also grown with you, I think it tells a lot about what you've done, right? And that validation still stick with us today. We have customers going all the way back to 8 years ago. One of them would be Secret Lab, right? The gaming chair company, right? So wow, their journey has been fantastic, and we've been very happy to be part of that journey. Right, that validation is great. Helping our customers go through tough time and digital transformation in their journey has also been a very rewarding, right? So during the COVID situation, we had this one client that sold books offline, right? So 95% of their business was kind of like on the event space, and because of COVID, obviously that was very restricted and very limited. And it was kind of like the moment for the company to switch to digital channels. And back then, only 5% of their business was online. And then they obviously, as any entrepreneurs, and I hats off to them, they immediately kind of pivot the entire business to focus on the online channels. But obviously, they didn't have they didn't know what they're getting into, because the operations of operating an online business, right, was quickly overwhelming them. Right. And they, at one point when we went in and tried to help them, they had like 2 weeks of backlog. Meaning you bought something and then it was like, haven't been packed for 2 weeks, right? So a lot of processes were very manual, and they were trying the best they can, but business scaled so fast, and the existing processes no longer work. So we were given a very tough deadline within 2 months to kind of transform the entire 200,000 square feet warehouse into a digital operation, right? And then we pulled through, right? I think during COVID, there was this spirit of camaraderie, right? We're just like, guys, let's just give our best to help each other, because we don't know if the world's gonna exist tomorrow, right? so that's when we really kind of put, and the whole team and the whole company really band together, and we delivered, right? And so happy that during that year, 2020, at the height of COVID, we were able to record R1 million worth of sales for them in one day, right, through the online channel. And that was one of the heights of that success. And when we saw that, and that company now thrives not only just offline and online, we feel validated and we feel success, right? So the customer's success story are some of the ones that really give us, a validation that we're doing something right.
I love that. I love the customer success stories and being able to see the impact that you're having on other organizations. I'm curious, kind of delving onto that same, but with a little bit of specificity on key metrics. Obviously, as an organization grows, it becomes more complex. It's hard to boil things down to a single or a set. But I am curious of whether or not you and your founding partner and your senior management team, is there a single key metric or a set of metrics that you use in order to be a guide on whether or not you're driving those exact same sort of results?
Yeah, so this is something that we've learned through failures as well, right? So early days, we didn't know how to manage a big growing company, and you try to focus on 10,000 different numbers, and it's not going to help you, because when you're focusing on 10,000 different numbers, none of them will work, right? So you have to kind of distill your entire business into a few set of easily understandable aggregate numbers, right? That gives you an idea where the direction of the company. And if everyone's speaking on a different number, then it's also very hard to manage, right? Because then this guy is going to be talking about A, they're going to be talking about B, and then you'll never get into a further understanding. So in 2018 and 19, we spent a lot of time structuring and deciding what are the numbers that we want to look at from every single division of our business, right? And from there, what are the metrics and what are the numbers and what is the target? And from there onwards, I think management of the company becomes much more easier, right? When we distill like maybe 4 or 5 different things that we have to look at every division, right? And then those are the things that we focus on. So for example, right? So our business is a warehousing business. So hence our business only grows as much as how much square feet we have. Right. So square feet utilization is actually one thing that we look at. And how do you look at square feet utilization? You can look at it many different ways. The way we choose to look at it was revenue per square feet. Right. So how much revenue per square feet do we generate this month? Right. And this would tell a lot of story, right? If it's low, it's either underutilized or the price is wrong, etc., etc. Right. So this is something that we look at, right? And driving that revenue per square feet every month upwards and upwards, it becomes like something easy to chase, right? And there's other things like labor percentage over revenue, right? So this one is also about how much how much labor intensive the job is.
Mhm.
How are we making it less and less difficult for our warehouse operators, right? If it's like an 80%, that means it's really not that efficient, right? And it's like there is a target. So now we've brought that down from like about high 60s, right, down to about 40s, and we're now aiming even lower, right? So that's how we kind of look at it. So obviously these are all internal metrics,
Mhm.
and by no means I'm asking all the other companies to look at it the same way, because I think every company will have different numbers to look at. You just have to decide and make sure that the whole management teams are talking at it the same language. And obviously that metrics can be fine-tuned and changed over the years, but then that's a different discussion with the management team.
Yeah, it's really tied into strategic intent. So what's the appropriate metric for you to look at may not always be the same one for somebody else. I think that's really great advice. Let me wrap up here with a couple of closing questions. So in running your business, is there a tech tool that you cannot live without?
So one of the things that we talk about is our love of technology, right? I think we are one of the first company that went cloud with with our WMS and our whole tech stack, right? So we've embraced the cloud so much that the entire company is based on cloud tools. So if you ask me, if I were to today, you take away all the cloud tools I have today, I think I'll be pretty crippled, right? So my life has so now revolved around the Google Calendar, right? The Google Contacts, the Google Chat. So like everything is on the cloud, right?
Yeah.
I no longer work on like spreadsheet Excel. We work on GDocs, right? Everything is collaborative, everything's on the cloud, and makes things easier, right? So even if I lose my laptop today, I can just buy a new one and immediately start work. And that I think has really made life easy for us.
Yeah, the
And
full suite of Google Workplace is just phenomenal for collaboration, especially if you're in multiple countries like yourself.
yeah, for sure, right? I cannot stress the importance of Google Calendar, right? So so founders like I have like 1,000 things to do, right? But if you synchronize your calendars, and what we've done with calendars, we've made it even we've made use of it a lot. Everyone actually have access to everyone's calendar, right? So then if you wanted to speak with me, you just have to look at my calendar and see there's a slot and just book it, right?
Okay.
And that's how it makes things so much easier.
Yeah, that's great. One last question. For other startup founders that are out there that are just getting started, what is the biggest piece of advice that you would offer them?
Biggest piece of so many failures to
Yeah.
pass on wisdom, right? But the one that I think is something very important is the passion, right? You need to find what you're really interested in. We kind of wasted the big part of our journey, me and Tommy, at the start, by pivoting to survive, right? Technically, you do have to do that, but then obviously we could have realized that much early on. But it's easy to lose track of what your North Star is when you're in survival mode. And a lot of startups are always in that mode, right? They're doing certain things just to make sure that they can survive. But then ultimately they have to look themselves in the mirror, right? And say, hey, is this something that I set out to do? Can I envision myself doing this for the next 10, 20 years? If the answer is yes, great. But if it's no, I think it's time to self-reflect and course correct as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. You have to have the passion in what you do. Joe, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us.
Hey, thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having us.
All right, that wraps it up for another fantastic episode of the Sea of Startups. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Go onto iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. It's the best way for us to get discovered and to have these startup stories reach a broader audience. If you have any suggestions or would like to get in touch, you can email me at kevin@indelible.vc. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Brockland from Indelible Ventures, and this is the Sea of Startups.